Hello, welcome to EPR, their favorite environmental enthusiasts, Nick and Laura. On today's episode, Laura and I talk about finding company culture. We have Leap Chear on to talk architecture, LEED certification, and building strong company culture. And finally, architecture was once an Olympic sport. In fact, during the first 4 decades of the modern Olympic Games, 151 medals were awarded for music, painting, sculpture, literature, and architecture. One caveat, every submission had to be sports related. I should have read that in a sportscaster announcer voice. And finally, no, I'm kidding. I won't do it. Let's hit that music. NAEP will be hosting the Advanced NEPA training in person at the Santa Clara Valley Water District on Friday, November 17th from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Pacific time. This workshop will benefit those professionals who work in related natural resource disciplines, who work with federal land management or related real estate transactions, federal agency projects or permitting, and transportation or other infrastructure projects with a NEPA review component. Register at www.naep.org.
Fantastic. Ready for that sponsor?
I've got one for sure. So here we go.
30-second comedy sponsor. Ready, go.
Okay. Are you tired of being tired? Aren't we all? Don't you wish there was a supplement you could take that would let you sleep forever? Yeah, so do we. And so at Sleep for Good, I'm telling you right now, you take this pill one time and you'll never have to worry about sleeping again. With our patented formula that includes multiple chemicals, including cyanide and arsenic, I think you'll find that this will be the best and last sleep of your life. Sleepforgood.com.
Oh my God, that's so morbid.
Oh, sorry.
Let's get to our segment.
So he's our first architect on the show, but he also talked a lot about building strong company culture. It was a nice topic, and they've won awards for their culture and for how they do things. So it was really neat to hear. I mean, it's a lot of stuff I think we've been talking about on the show.
But you're going to this leadership stuff. Is that things that you're talking about?
Well, yeah, I think there's a couple of things. Like there's companies, that I've seen over the years have done several things. Like there's different leadership styles and paths and teaching of leadership. Sometimes it's webinars and, courses, and sometimes it's in-person training. Sometimes it's an actual program, and sometimes it is, welcome to corporate culture. Here's what it's like. And then, you can make the most of that when you get there. And I'm doing the latter right now, but I've done all those other things too. And I know you have exposure to those, and you've done some of that yourself from the teaching side of it. And honestly, that's one of those things that I would like to do too. Long term, I love mentorship, and I've been a mentor. I almost was like, I'm a good mentor.
I heard that. I was like, wait, he's going to say it.
Yeah. Someone else has to tell you I'm good. And I like doing that a lot. And I think paying that forward is really, really important. And so I think all that kind of ties into leadership in general and culture and how your team approaches certain problems and challenges. And yeah, I think that's kind of neat. So I don't know. I mean, from your perspective, when we talk about developing good leaders, because we have actually a couple of our upcoming episodes, we talk about leadership quite a bit. So maybe we should focus more on company culture, but they're all kind of interconnected.
They're definitely connected. The funny thing for me is, like, I remember walking through Ybor City one time, and there was a outdoor bar, and they were having a company, happy hour or something. And the owner of the company just kept saying, like, well, we have great culture, and we're going to keep having great culture. And our culture is the thing that makes us the best. And we have the most awesome culture. And it was like, I bet this dude can't tell me what that means. Right. He just kept throwing out the word culture. And, so it's abstract, right? It's not like a clear definition, and good culture in Google is different maybe than it looks like in another company, but they all have their same core, and the people who are the leaders need to be the ones to understand that and role model it and all that good stuff. But I think go ahead.
I was gonna say, it's like, to me, to use a sports analogy that you'll totally get. It's like when leadership changes, or when there's a different dynamic in play now. In the sports world, they talk about whether you fit your system to your team or your team to your system. And, the most successful in my experience has always been like who your players are matters and who's on your team matters. And, if somebody's really great at marketing and you have them writing technical reports, that's a disservice to both you and your culture. And so it's trying to identify those things is really important as like a leader. It's one of the things you have to identify. And one thing I wanted to ask you, because I think this is, maybe I'm biased on this, but it doesn't matter how great your culture is, it's not for everybody, right? Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So what should people do? Like, because I think that's really hard for when you're younger, identifying like, if you're not happy at your job, why is that?
Yeah.
So how do you look for that? How do you find that? What you actually want?
That's a great point. And I think probably the best way to like pull that back out further. So there's an analogy is like I'm in Atlanta right now, right? There's a certain vibe, a certain culture here. Mm-hmm. It's different than New York City. It is different than Seattle.
Yes.
It's the same for a company, right? So when you're deciding like, where am I going to live? Like currently, like I'm looking for options outside of Syracuse. What kind of culture am I looking for? Like Atlanta it's very creative. It's very, fast paced. It's kind of like it's fast and slow paced at the same time.
It is.
Kind of.
I was about to say that.
It's like,
so is.
Yeah. So, what speed do you want to have your life? And it's the same thing with work. What speed of work do you want? What kind of, nightlife? Is it the kind of culture where the company hangs out together after work, or is it just like all business? I went to a engineering company one time and they worked in the dark, in the silence with their headphones on, and they all loved it. But oh my gosh, most people, a lot of people, I wouldn't say most people, but a lot of people, that would be so uncomfortable for them.
Right.
So yeah, culture just manifests itself in a lifestyle almost. So it's almost like business, the lifestyle of the company, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it makes a huge difference. And the thing with the leadership is like, a lot of times they think it just happens.
Right.
But if you own a company, you got to determine what kind of culture do you want, and are you achieving that type of culture that you're looking for?
And it's not static. I think that's really important too. Even, any company, it changes over time. It changes with new leadership. It just gradually changes with different people in different positions. And generationally, it changes. It just, certain things will matter a little bit more or less depending on who's with you.
Right. But the thing is, you want it to drift in the direction that you want it, that you're okay with it going, not in a direction that is opposite of what you want. Because then, when you start having high turnover, that's when people are unsatisfied. And a lot of times it's because that culture is not, and the culture can just be downright terrible. Sometimes culture is like the family culture, right? A lot of times companies will boast about their family culture, but what that really means is you're toxic. And, and it just means that a certain number of people who are your favorites, like just like a family culture, they get to stay and they get to make all the shots, but everyone else feels like a redheaded stepchild. So you got to be careful too.
Yeah.
I think naming your culture is a great exercise.
Interesting. That's very interesting. I mean, I think there's good things about families as well. So, it really depends on your experience, because if that means love and support, that's great. If it means, you never get fired no matter what because it's family, that's less great. And so, yeah, I think even the term family can go in so many different ways. But yeah,
typically when I have worked with companies and they boast about their family culture, it's because they're okay with like arguing with each other. They're okay with like, we stab each other in the back, but tomorrow we're cool. And that is fine. But when a new person, like think about that with a family, a new person comes in, a lot of times they don't really fit into that. And yeah, you're right. There's different types of family culture also, but typically when a company starts saying they're family, it's because they're allowing for a whole lot of bad stuff.
Yeah. That's interesting. I like that. Yeah. Because it's funny. It's one of the things that, truthfully, it's one of the things Dawson talks about is, Ohana means family. That's one of the things that's very important. But what that means to us is very different, I think, than what you're describing. And how we even talk about it is very, very different. We don't have a blame culture. When there's mistakes, we make them as a team. And the responsibility falls to leadership. And that's just kind of how it should be. But yeah, it's so true though. I can totally see where you're coming from. And, there's others, there's cultures like engineering versus architecture. I'll give you a good example of one.
Oh, please give me a bad example.
Oh yeah, right. Okay, cool. So anyways, I'll just tell you one of my jokes. So it's an engineering firm that has architects, right?
Yeah.
The engineering firm lets the architects design the cubicles for the company, the next wave of cubicles. And so the architects design them to be very open, to the point where like you can be in one room and you can see every single person in it. So they do that, they start putting them in, and then the complaints from the engineers skyrocket. They're like, I can't get any work done because it's so noisy and I can see everybody and it's all of this. And I liked the, prison walls that we had prior to this. The architects are like, that's the worst possible thing for us. And then the company was like, you know what? We can do two things. So they have engineering designed cubes and architecture designed. That was the compromise, basically. So, even stuff like that matters.
Yeah. I mean, is the culture caring? Is the culture collaborative? Is the culture, so like, and I think that it's important that the leadership does not make those decisions or evaluate on their own, right? You've got to be asking the staff, the employees, what do you feel like the culture? Because we can say all day what we want the culture to be, what we think it is. Yeah. But it only is what it is, Right. Right. So you have to ask people what they think it is. Yeah. And make sure that you've aligned it correctly.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And I think that's that's a good spot for us to stop.
Yeah. Because I think I'm really interested. Like I missed this episode to interview on, so I'm really excited to listen to what Leap has to say.
Yeah, it's a good one. Let's get to it. Hello and welcome back to EPR. Today we have Leap Chear, Senior Architect and Planner at EAPC Architects Engineers on the show. Welcome.
Thank you for having me here.
Of course. Now, I want to start in the most obvious place. So you went to school in North Dakota and are currently living in South Dakota. So is there a state rivalry between those two states? And if so, where do you fall?
Yeah, so absolutely. There's a huge rivalry between North Dakota and South Dakota. I'm a North Dakota State graduate, an alumni of Bison Nation, and then living in South Dakota where the South Dakota State Jackrabbits have had long time rivalry, and it's fun. I really enjoy that. College football, basketball, it's all good.
Yeah, that's great. I figured there would be. How could there not be, right? So great to hear that. Do you ever get any flack for going to school in North Dakota but living in South Dakota?
Absolutely. When we do projects for South Dakota schools, they know that I'm from North Dakota, and so they'll give me some hard times about that, especially when we're working on like athletic facilities for them. Yeah. They know that, so it is, but it's all good nature, and we love it. It's what makes that rivalry between the two states, two schools, even more interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. As I grew up in Virginia, we have Virginia, Maryland is one, and I live in North Carolina. So it's obviously the same North and South Carolina, very, very similar. So yeah, I'm happy to hear it. But yeah, you're also our first architect on the show, which is really exciting. And there's almost too many questions we could ask you, but let's start with a little bit about what is the day-to-day life for an architect? What do they do?
Well, I think that is always a challenge to be able to try to describe what we do day in, day out. Most feel or think that architects just put together blueprints. Right. And that's just the very, very tip of the iceberg in what architects do, from just working with clients at the very beginning to try and understand their vision, what they want to do, and then helping them fulfill that vision, talking through what spaces that they'd like to have in there, and talking through budgets and talking through their ideas. Do they have grandiose visions of what their building wants to be? What is the nature of their business? We try to understand that before stepping into the project itself. We can go through lots of different stages of design, pre-design, lots of technical nature, understanding codes and working with local jurisdiction, because every city, municipalities, all very different, have different zoning ordinances and codes adoptions. So it's our role to understand that and help the client make sure that their project gets designed and gets approved by the city, and then going forward, and then helping them through the bidding process, vetting out, if they get half a dozen contractors bidding the projects, it's like, how do we know beyond the low bids, how do we know which one's qualified to be able to do this project. And so that's our duty, diligence in helping the clients.
Oh.
And then seeing the project through construction, answering questions contractors may have, and then just making sure that the construction is being built the way it was designed and the intent of the design.
Mm-hmm.
And then, obviously closing out the project, getting to walk through, doing those punch lists and making sure that everything gets taken care of before the owner takes occupancy of it. So just a fulfilling process.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And there's, a multitude of ways we can go from here. And I'll try to touch on a few things, broadly. But it's really interesting. I didn't know you guys were also part of the process to help bid out the project, which makes total sense. It really does. I don't know why I didn't think of that. So, I'm assuming when you have a project, you've got a project going forward, the bid's won, you're starting to do things, there have to be mid-construction changes. So what are those kind of challenges you see when you're in the middle of something and maybe like the design you had initially isn't going to work? How do you manage those changes?
Yeah, I think those are the process of the development of design. It could take various turns. From an owner's perspective, let's say, they're happy with everything that has been talked about, it's been incorporated into the design, and then all of a sudden, they want to add something to the project. And that's where the challenge is like, we're in the middle of design. So they want to add, maybe it's another 1,500 square feet to the project.
Right.
And it's very specific in what they do, what they want for their building. And so then it's like, okay, well, we understand that. And let's figure out how we can incorporate this additional 1,500 square feet into the project. And it's just walking them through that process. And, at some instances, we're already into construction and contractors on board and they're like, this is going to throw a wrench into schedule and everything else.
Right.
But once everybody's informed of that and the potential costs, of the additional design, how that impacts the project, we work through it. I mean, it's a matter of teamwork. We have responsibilities, again, making sure that this addition, again, is in compliance with codes and so forth. And obviously, we have to go back to the city and say, we are adding a little bit more to it, and this is how it impacts codes or it doesn't. And then we go through and make sure that all of that is on the up and up, and then we proceed forward.
So for the whole process, right, start to finish, you have the design, you have the build version, and then, finally it gets completed. I'm assuming the challenges are different as they go, but is there a part of the process that's the most important or most challenging that you have to get right initially? Or is it kind of just depends on the project kind of thing?
Well, I think, again, it's understanding the vision of the client. And as we spend time upfront kind of flushing those things out, and once we have that understanding, we help to develop a story behind their project. And the story, again, allows the design team, which includes architects, interior designers, engineering, mechanical, electrical, structural, civil, that they all understand that. And so every decision that is made helps support that story, which the owner already approved of and the design team understands. And so it makes it a lot easier when decisions come later on in the design process or even construction. Like if we are making a change, does it still conform to the original design intent? Does it still support the story? If it doesn't, what are the reasons for that? And how does that impact the overall project budget and schedule?
Yeah, that's very interesting. And it's really, really cool to see that whole thing kind of come together. So what are the kinds of projects that you do? You mentioned buildings for municipalities, but what are those?
Yeah, well, we primarily, for myself, I do a lot of work with higher education institutions, so colleges and universities, and completed a couple of projects. And the first project it's a new major for the university where they combined plant science department with agriculture engineering to create a new major called precision agriculture. And so we're creating a building that is a collaboration between two departments very different in nature, but it's combining the two and how do they work together to provide the education, for the new farmers in the United States, where they can produce more on the same acreage and then just being very precise, when it comes to getting the right moisture into the soil or the nutrients, pest controls, and so forth, that they don't have to blanket the entire site, but they can be very specific to the site. So plant science, agriculture, engineering, kind of a forced marriage, if you will, to create this new major. And throughout the building, collaboration space is developed so that faculties and students can come together to work out solutions. So that project is, again, it's a LEED silver project. Mm-hmm. So it's one of the state's requirements. So we worked through it and we looked at ways to, reduce water consumption, reduce parking counts. This is a campus setting and parking is a challenge, but we did not add any more parking. In fact, we helped reduce the number of parking on campus. And so part of the sustainability is not to, again, being manageable about like hard surfaces, right? So they kind of don't allow stormwater to percolate, but yet they kind of impact how stormwater moves. So,
yes, 100%.
Daylights and views, really critical to the project. It's over 130,000 square foot buildings that needs to have access to daylight and views to the outside. So that was pretty critical for us to be able to do. We also looked at renewable energy, adding photovoltaic, basically solar panels to help generate not a lot of power, but enough power to help offset, the needs for the building.
Gotcha.
And then we've done a basketball arena project where it's a large facility. How do you incorporate sustainable practice into something like that?
Yeah.
Again, the project itself, first and foremost, it's bringing an aged building up to modern day codes for lighting, ventilation, accessibility is huge. Restroom, toilet counts in terms of male to female restrooms in these sporting arenas. So it's, again, not discounting existing building, aged building, but what can we do to bring life back into it? What can we do to bring it into the modern day competition environment? So I think making that decision from the university standpoint is just being sustainable and good stewards of what they have.
Yeah. That sparks a question for me. As an architect, when you see restoration or new build, does that mean anything to you? Are you like, oh, thank goodness we get to start from scratch? Or would you rather do one or the other? Or are they just different?
Well, they're very different. In the United States, there's many existing buildings, right? And what are the options? Well, you could either just let it sit abandoned or you can rehab it. So there's great energy that gets infused into an old building where new life is coming back around. That's great for a community. It's great for, especially like downtown where you've got kind of a rundown area, a blighted site or a building that just needs a lot of TLC, right? And so investing into those types of properties, has its advantages as well. And you can still make an existing building very sustainable. New builds, I think every architect would love to have, those new constructions. But again, there's lots of existing buildings that's going to need rehabilitation, repurposing into something new as far as its use. Yeah. So for me, I don't really have a preference. I enjoy doing both, right? So as a company, I'd say maybe 70-75% of our work is rehabilitation.
Right.
It's taking existing structure and repurposing it.
Gotcha. Yeah. And you mentioned LEED certification too. I always think it's very fascinating. And that's basically just you're designing a sustainable building and there's different levels of it depending on what you're doing. So when you go into a project knowing it's going to be LEED certified to a certain degree, I think it's what was silver and gold. I'm not sure if there's another, but I mean, how challenging is that versus using a standard practice for a standard building?
Not terribly challenging. In fact, most projects can achieve LEED certification on just best practices. We as a company, we try to incorporate a lot of those sustainable criteria into just your everyday building, energy efficiency, low water consumption, daylights and views. I mean, those are just the basic things that architects look at the start of a project, whether it's new construction, new build, or rehab. It's just a great opportunity to be able to inject new life back into existing buildings and opportunities to create something new, vibrant in new buildings. But again, just kind of understanding how those new projects fit into the context of a neighborhood, a downtown area. That's very important.
Yeah, of course. And you mentioned sustainability a couple of times. And one of the things I wanted to ask you is, so how has sustainability changed over time in the industry, and where do you see it going in the future?
I think it's going to, again, just get incorporated into everyday practice. I think the leaders out there, various sustainable, organization, United States Green Building Council, WELL, and Green Globe. I mean, they're all going to be very relevant, will continue to be very relevant in everyday practice. But as far as from a design industry, again, a lot of that is getting adapted into what we do day in, day out, much like accessibility.
Yeah.
That when it first came out, it's like, oh, we got to incorporate this. But now it becomes just normal practice. A building has to be accessible. Sustainability, I think it's from a developer, real estate side. Companies want to be in buildings that are being good stewards, right, of the resources. And big companies, they have part of their pro forma criteria is that, hey, this building, we need to be in a building because it's part of their marketing campaign and their image, their brand. We want to be occupying a building that has sustainability incorporated into every facet of it.
Right.
So I do see it becoming more and more mainstream, that it's not just a special thing. Some of our clients don't want to go through that process, but there is a marketing side to having a building with these LEED certifications, because it's like, it says to the public, we're invested in what we do and we care about the environment. We care about the impact of our building to the environment and how it impacts the people that work there, live there.
Which is great. That's just great. And I totally agree. I think it's absolutely fascinating. And it's to see it change over time. And that's really cool that, you say people do pay attention to what companies do, more so now than ever, I would say. It's funny, if we can take a step back too, and I want to talk a little bit about the field in general, right? So architecture is a challenging field to get into. It's a challenging field to be in. So what advice would you have for people who are looking to break into it?
I would say that from very early on, even like in high school, job shadow, learn more about what it is that an architect does. We as a company, we take that on. We work with school districts, and throughout a semester, we would have students come into our office and just learn more about the everyday life in an architect world. And so just kind of understand a little bit of everything that we do. It can be mundane at times, but it's like, it's not just one thing. It's like all of these different aspects from the early on programming side of a project all the way through designing and then construction side. Mm-hmm. And then, how do these, I guess, pretty pictures, just to put it in kind of very simple terms, how does that get generated? Well, it's understanding how to use a software, but then it's like, what generated that image? Why is the building so tall, so wide? And why did you do all these push and pulls at the facades of the building? There's reasons for it. And I think for high school students, it's doing the job shadow.
Yeah.
For those in college, get into a firm to do your internship, right? Even if it's a summer internship, learn about the practice more because it is becoming more technical than it used to be. I think the more that people have understandings of the profession, and then as they're going through school, firms will oftentimes take those students on and continue, to employ them and even help them through that process of testing to obtain their licensure and then maintaining their license, once they have it, and what does it mean to have a license and even in multiple states.
Right.
So it's like, get in there early, learn as much as you can, because it may not be for them, right? But it's better to discover it early than be 10 years into it. It's like, man, I wish I could have done something else. Nobody wants that.
Right. 100%. And, one of the things I've noticed about you in particular, you really do enjoy working with students. I've seen that in a couple of different places. So what about it do you enjoy? What do you get out of working with students and doing these internships, working with universities to get, projects going? What about that interests you?
Yeah. It's trying to pass on just some of that professional knowledge, what the industry is doing, and then how it directly relates to what they're going through, with education. For me personally, I just see, again, this is our future workforce.
Yeah.
They're coming into the profession. And, what do we, those who are practitioners, want the future workforce to know about the profession, what we do? And I think any opportunity that we have to partner up with an institution, a university, with architecture and engineering, construction management, anytime we have an opportunity to partner with them, we're going to do it. That's just our business. And not every company does it. But, we can't afford not to invest that kind of time and energy because, down the road, they could be like maybe running our company someday, right? So it's like, let's invest in the future.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that drives my motivation, I guess, for wanting to connect more with students.
Yeah. I mean, it's a perfect answer. It's absolutely great. You're totally right. So I'm glad to hear that. So now you have, like you say, we've talked a little bit about like starting out in your careers, how to get involved, but what does your career path look like? Maybe it's yours you want to talk about, or just, architecture in general. How do you go from starting out in the industry to being a leader like you are?
Yeah, I think it's really up to the individual. What motivates them, what drives them. Those who know where they want to go early in their career, they create this path, right? And then they connect with other professionals, if they're working in the office, they connect with them so that they can help them, right? It's that mentorship relationship that is going to help people get to where they want to be. I didn't know that I would end up being a partner in a multidisciplinary firm. I just know that I want to be able to help create opportunities for others, right? I see that. And we as a company, we're nearly 200 people, 10 offices in 4 states. So there are definitely opportunities for our people. And we want to make sure that we are prepared for that. 5 years from now, all of our younger staff, they're going to gain more experience. What's going to happen to them, right? They're starting to see those pictures. And then our mid-level becomes more senior level, and our senior levels become, leaders in the company. So opportunities needs to be created. And I do enjoy more on the development of people, right? Mm-hmm. And that's not what I went to school for.
Right.
It was about designing buildings, the built environment. But I've had my days, doing those designs, but now it's about investing in the future to allow others to kind of make their pathway through our company and developing future leaders to replace me as a leader in the firm.
Right.
So, I'm about 5 years into partnerships with the company, but I'm already thinking about, hey, at some point I'm going to retire. So what are we going to do to help build new leadership?
Yeah.
So
yeah,
that interests me significantly.
Yeah, it's great, and leads right into like my next question. I think it's kind of the heart of one of the big reasons we wanted to have you on. You know, you have built a really strong culture at EAPC. So what does good business culture look like, and how do you find the people that fit that vision? It's easy to say, oh, we'll mentor people and teach people, but you know, that's not simple. How do you do it?
Yeah. I think office culture, office environment really is different for every company, right? For ours, you know, we're multi-discipline, first of all, architects, engineers, many disciplines, multiple offices in multiple states. So our footprint is really big. You know, how do we get our 200 some staff to really be able to connect with each other? And it's leading by example. How do you connect virtually? How you can be intentional in your office to go and make those connections. It's about creating a fun office environment that people can enjoy and come in, do their work, be fulfilled. I think that's really critical, not only in the profession, what we do, but also being fulfilled in how we relate to the community that we live in. What can we do together as an office, a group of individuals with common goals to make a difference in our community? Yesterday, half of our office went to help do a community build. It's a new veteran community, right, of these small homes. And half of our staff was doing that. The other half was on the road, project meetings, on the reservation.
Oh, wow.
Right. So there's opportunity to make a difference in what we do. Design, architecture does impact the environment. And what can we do to reduce our footprint, really, in terms of design and construction?
Yeah, I mean, and there's long-term benefits for that, right? Like one of the best reasons. And so I work for a Native Hawaiian company, and that's one of the big values we have too, is being part of your community. But you know, one of the big reasons is you have connection points, and people feel like not just that they're working, but they're also part of a larger community. And yeah, it's great to hear that you have that as well. And like I say, we're getting closer to the end here. We love to ask people a couple of standard questions. One of them is about your experiences doing your job. So we like to ask about memorable moments on the work that you do, a time that's either funny or scary or unique, where you were working as an architect doing your job and you're like, oh, wow, this is a new change, big changes, whatever it is. Or, you know, even if you make a mistake, you know, we love hearing those stories too. Because, you know, we're in the field, you're in the field, you take one step and all of a sudden, you know, your entire leg is in a swamp, right?
Right.
So I don't know.
Yeah,
you have a story like that for us?
Yeah. So I'll start with the mistake. In the industry, they call it E&O, so error and omissions. You know, we all strive to just be as perfect as we can on each project, right? Nobody wants mistakes on their projects. And on a typical project, there could be smaller projects, could be, you know, half a dozen people working on it, to larger projects where there could be 30 to 40 people working on it. So many sets of eyes are looking at the project, but, you know, through the process of design and putting the construction documents together, including specifications, sometimes some things get missed or the wrong material is specified.
Right.
In this case, we specified the wrong material. But, okay, so what do you do? Well, as you asked earlier about culture, that office culture, you know, I want to make sure that we own it as a team, right? Not just one person that's responsible for managing the project, but it's the team, the entire team. And essentially, it's the office. How do we take care of that? Well, we know it's a mistake. And so right away, we help develop a solution. Right? And then we worked with the client and we told them, here's what we did. This was our mistakes, clearly. We're working to resolve this. We're working with the contractor. We're working with a third-party consultant that's providing some analysis. And we're going to own it, right? Yeah. We have professional liability insurance that's going to pay for, you know, a good portion of that. The others comes out of our pocket.
Right.
And so it's like how you handle mistakes is absolutely crucial for an owner, right? So if you and I are owners of a project, we want to make sure that our design team who are advocating for us can be honest about it, own it, and let's work through it together. And because of that, here's the silver lining behind it. The client was very just pleased just hearing that admission, first of all. Yeah. And they said, we appreciate that. We're going to work with you through this. And a couple of weeks later, we were interviewing for another project with them. And that came up in our Q&A, and we answered it, truthfully, because it's like, this is what happened, and this is how we handled it. And it won us another project. So a costly mistake, again, we own it, and it turned into another multi-million-dollar project with the client because they want that type of relationship. So for young architects, don't be afraid to admit the mistake, own it, and ask for help and work through it. And because of that, you're building your reputation, that integrity is important, and it's going to go a long way. The next job that they're looking at, or within the company, promotions take place, and leadership knows there's a mistake made, but still, this is how it was handled. And that's the key.
Yeah, it's
key
trust, right? Absolutely.
Yep.
It's like, we can trust this person. Yep. They made a mistake and told us, and we were able to find a solution. And then the client sees it the same way. We can trust them.
Yeah.
Yep. Love to hear that. Love to hear that. So, okay, we talked about architecture. We talked about, your firm. But what do you do for fun? What is, like, when you hang up the architecture gear, you go home, what do you do for fun?
Well, it's about how do I even use what I do every day to help others? And my wife and I are experiencing, that emptiness syndrome right now. Our kids are growing up, and, we enjoy, again, just kind of working with our hands. And so through our church, we partner up with Casas por Cristo. So they are an organization that builds homes for families in third world countries. So my son and I had an opportunity to do that in the Dominican Republic. My wife and I are going to do that this January in Guatemala. So we're going to, meet the basic needs which is of shelter, right? So these families in these third world countries do not have a home. What they have is not to any of our standards today, but this is just an opportunity to build a very modest home with our church group. And to them, it's like lifting them up out of just abject poverty into, hey, we can have a chance. And so that's kind of our missions. We're continuing to do that. And at least once a year, we try to participate and just give back, because we feel the basic needs of shelter is essential. And it's very relevant to architecture, the design industry, what we do. So it's very fulfilling.
Oh, 100%. And I love that your hobby still kind of ties to your job a bit too. That's great.
Yeah.
And it's really, like you say, very noble. I'm really, really glad you guys are doing that. That's wonderful. So we are close to time. So is there anything we didn't talk about that you'd like to share with our audience?
I think we covered, a lot of that. And I think what we do as the design professionals, architects within the community, it's about how we engage in our community with what we do, how we help the clients, maybe connecting with another partnership to fully realize a project that is very beneficial to the community, right? So anytime you get a business and the city doing a joint venture on a project within their community and being intentional about it, meeting the needs, that's just a beginning of a beautiful relationship. And it creates for a healthy community, and it creates for a healthy, trusting relationship between city leaders, businesses, and then the design team that comes and helps pull all of that together. Yeah. So it is fulfilling. We provide a service, and we take that very seriously. But more important than anything, it's about relationship, that we connect with our clients and with community. we try to understand their world when we approach design. And when we have a little bit of that knowledge and understanding, it makes projects a little bit more successful for us.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. And if people do want to reach out to you and ask you any questions themselves, where can they find you? Yeah,
so they can reach me with my email address. It's leap.chear. So it's leap.chear@EAPC.net.
Perfect. Thank you so much for being here.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
That's our show. Please be sure to check us out each and every Friday. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. See you, everybody.
Bye.